Well, live from the Rocky Mountains, this is Redacted. I'm Clayton Morris.
I'm Natalie Morris.
It's a windy, blustery day here. Good to see all of you guys. Welcome into the show. We've got a very busy show for you on this Monday. President Trump holding over 2-hour peace talks with Russian President Vladimir Putin, and Zelensky saying, well, hey, you might have spoken, but I spoke to him earlier, and then we called afterwards, and we got on the phone, and I talked too. We had a conversation as well. So will we actually see peace in Ukraine? President Trump seems to be hinting that that is the case. Let the process begin were his words. So we'll talk about that with Colonel McGregor in just a moment.
Plus, President Biden now says he's been suffering from cancer, and this is brand new information. Okay, but we rewound the tape since he ran for vice president since 2008, and we've known he's had a pre-existing prostate condition. Why is no one talking about this? This is something that they should have known all along. So what are we to deduce about, the lies of the Democratic Party, whether or not they kept this from the kingmakers like Obama, Pelosi? You know that if those people knew, they would have used this to coup him. So they must not have known. They don't trust each other. This is absolutely clear from this, and we're going to show you the receipts.
I like the verbing of that. I'm going to coup you. I'm going to coup you. And that's exactly what they did. We're also going to talk about, well, you could call it basically a coup. You could call it election fraud. You could call it whatever. In Romania, picking a new puppet president of Romania that backs the EU. Shocking turn of events there. Plus, we're going to talk about the truth about Jeffrey Epstein. And now we heard from Kash Patel and Dan Bongino that says he absolutely did kill himself. We've seen the files. Really? Okay. We're going to talk about all of that.
Can we see the files?
Yeah. Well,
We've kind of been asking for that.
They've been on a desk for a while. Can we please see those things?
Right. No, you don't get to see it. Just trust me. It happened exactly the way the government told us that it did.
All right, let's talk peace, shall we? This is the story we've been waiting for. We're hoping for a long time. Peace in Ukraine. Could this actually happen? Just a short time ago, President Trump got off the phone with Russian President Vladimir Putin. Putin then came out to the podium to say a few words about how that phone call went. Watch this.
Добрый вечер. Меня коллеги просили сказать несколько слов о результатах нашего телефонного.
The results of our telephone conversation with the President of the United States. Indeed, this conversation took place. It lasted more than 2 hours. I would like to note it was very informative and very frank. So that was, and it goes on from there. He spoke for about another few minutes. The President of the United States also releasing an update from his Truth Social account saying just completed a 2-hour call with Vladimir Putin. Basically says we're trying to end this catastrophic bloodbath. There's tremendous opportunity for Russia to do massive trade deals with the United States, jobs, wealth. The potential is unlimited. He says he also spoke with Zelensky. He basically says, peace, peace, peace. Let the process begin. Let's bring in Colonel Douglas McGregor, who worked for President Trump and has, of course, been calling for peace from the very beginning. Make peace, you fools. Is it too early, Colonel, for us to be popping the champagne here? I get very excited when I see this from both sides. I don't want you to rain on my parade. I don't want you to
But he wants an honest answer.
But I want an honest answer. Is my champagne going to be flat?
I would keep the cork in the bottle and keep the champagne cool.
Okay.
I think that, first of all, President Putin is always polite, and he was polite in his comments. I don't know the substance of the whole discussion. The only way to know that is to see the transcript. But I think from some of the things that I heard him say in the rest of the presentation, that the Russians are certainly ready for a ceasefire, but provided the preconditions for such a thing are actually met. And remember, the Russians have unchanging goals, and he reiterated that. Their position is established, it's well known. We want a neutral Ukraine. We want a denazified Ukraine, and so forth. We're not interested in simply stopping the war in order to pause long enough for Ukraine to receive more weapons, ammunition, and support from Ukraine's allies in Washington and in Europe. There's no evidence at this point in time that those goals and those conditions, frankly, are going to be met. Now, I know that the Pope has now offered to mediate, and that's nice. And I'm sure that President Putin will be delighted to have the Pope step in and do whatever he can do. I think we have to keep in mind that Putin wants good relations with the United States. He's dealt with President Trump before, and he knows that President Trump has frequently said things that ultimately didn't turn out to be accurate because he was unable to impose his will on his own government. So I think, to sum up briefly, yeah, I'm sure it was constructive. I'm sure there will be some discussions now between the Russians and the Ukrainians. Whether or not that's going to lead to a substantive ceasefire is very unclear. And I think the chances are not that great.
What do you make of Zelensky being excluded from this talk, which seems to be the most fruitful? What it says to me is that his presence is like, when mommy and daddy are talking, you need to be quiet, that he is only a hindrance. And what he said in his X post after he spoke to President Trump is, it is crucial that the United States not distance itself from these talks, meaning I can't do it. I'm at the kids' table still. It's got to be the United States and Russia.
Well, it always had to be us because we are the driving force behind the war. If you take us out of the equation, there is no war. There would not have been a coup in 2014. Right. Wouldn't have had any biolabs. The massive quantities of weaponry, which President Trump also approved and sent to Ukraine while he was in his first term, those things wouldn't have happened. So this thing can only end ultimately with one of two things happening. Either we stop supporting Zelensky, full stop, and that has to happen, and we pull all of the Americans in and out of uniform out of Ukraine. That's one way to end this. That's a very serious action that guarantees the first serious, decisive step in the direction of a ceasefire. If that doesn't happen, the only other alternative is that Zelensky and his inner circle probably don't survive too much longer. The Russians cross the Dnieper River and seize Kiev and probably also eventually Odessa. Maybe one before the other, I don't know. But right now, the Russians are moving to the west, and they're going to continue to move until they've closed up on the Dnieper River. That's not going to stop, and they've made that very clear that whatever goes on during these talks, until the conditions that they've outlined take place, nothing will change. They will continue to advance. So under those circumstances, that's why I think it's very unlikely you're going to get an end to this thing. And the sad part of all of this is I think because of the positions that President Trump has taken, that have been very, very misguided in my view, he is really irrelevant to the process. Unless he intervenes to stop the flow of armaments, cash, ammunitions, and support to the Zelensky regime, and then pulls us out, frankly, whatever he does is not going to be taken very seriously. And right now, there are a lot of people in Moscow saying to Putin behind the scenes, why bother? You know, why believe anything the man says? What evidence do we have that the Americans are serious about anything? Nothing survives an election cycle. You know, the policies are too incoherent and unpredictable. So stay the course, finish the war, end it on our terms, whatever that turns out to be. I think all of those things are happening in Moscow. But I think Mr. Putin knows President Trump. He wants to be polite to him. And I'm sure he said nice things to him and said yes. But he also said, as I understand it, a ceasefire provided the preconditions we've discussed in the past are met. And until those are met, and that includes an end to all of this military aid to Zelensky, I don't see anything halting. I think the war will continue and the advance to the West will continue.
I mean, you're hitting at the heart of the matter here, which is that Putin holds all the cards. You've seen Europe, of course, aligning itself. They want to funnel more weapons and support to Zelensky. Even when Trump and J.D. Vance had that White House meeting where they chastised Zelensky and said, you know, we're not going to be a party to this. You don't hold the cards here. It seems what can you worked for President Trump? What can he do here, if anything, to stop this? Does he have the power just over Europe to say, stop sending weapons into Ukraine, stop supporting this, stop supporting Nazis inside of Ukraine? All of that. I mean, it seems like an incredibly tall order. If not, then are we just going to continue this? Does this war just continue for years.
Well, listen, first, you're right. Absolutely right, Clayton. He can bring tremendous pressure to bear on our allies. There are things he can do. But for whatever reason, he has chosen not to do that. And I don't see any evidence that he's suddenly going to turn around and do it. That's why the easiest thing for him is to put the Europeans who refuse to play ball on his terms in an indefensible position. What is that? Pull the plug on Zelensky. Pull the plug on Kyiv. Sorry, folks, we're out. We've had it. We'll be happy to host, the peace conference, but we're out. We're not doing any more. Remember that the European leaders are not reflecting the views that their populations hold. No one in Germany wants to go to war with Russia. Forget it. I don't see any evidence that anyone in France does. Now, I don't know what is going on in Great Britain, and I think it's almost impossible to tell. That place is so heavily censored and so oppressive these days, I can't evaluate. But my sense tells me that there aren't very many Englishmen lining up to go to fight in Eastern Europe. The Poles have made it abundantly clear they don't want anything to do with a war there. Now you have the crazy Estonians that have tried to provoke the Russians, and now they're in a lot of trouble because the Russians have taken a tanker, and they made it pretty clear that they could shut down Estonia, in 24 hours, unless the Estonians shut up and start behaving like adults. But they don't want to do that. They don't want to be drawn into that. And of course, that's exactly what somebody like Mark Rutte would cheer on. He'd love to see that because he's part of this globalist elite class that wants to lead Europe, further down on the road into hell, where they've practically hit bottom as it is. So no, I think it's a matter of pulling the rug out from under the Europeans by taking decisive action on his part to say, that's it, I'm out. Now, he could do that. He could wait to see what this new discussion amounts to. Wait to see if the Ukrainians go in there and take a different position. The Russians have some wiggle room. There's no question about it. They would like to end this thing. How wide and broad that wiggle room is, I don't know, but I think it exists. But the Ukrainians are the ones that have just said flat out, no, they're not going to recognize the legitimacy of anything that the Russians have done, because that would put into jeopardy the raison d'etre for their entire regime. So my suspicion is that if this fails, the smart thing for President Trump to do is say, well, I've talked to all the parties. This is the best I can do. There is no will right now to end this. So I'm doing the following. I'm leaving. I'm ending my relationship with the Kiev regime. And I think that's the best way to promote peace. Now, everyone in Washington will revolt against him, but they're irrelevant because the American population has no damn interest whatsoever in what happens in Ukraine. Wake up. Nobody here wants to go to war there. Forget it.
Right.
Yeah. And so something Zelensky said in this, he speaks nonsense all the time, but it's as if he thinks he has pull over what America does. And so he says if Russia continues to drag out this war, then they will deserve it when Europe and America and the world act accordingly, including with further sanctions. So he thinks he's leading this. And he's like, I'm going to set my dogs on you, as if America's going to do what he says. He's such an incredibly dangerous little mole.
Well, he is dangerous because he's backed by most of the same people who are backing Netanyahu. And that's what you have to understand. He's not out there on his own. This globalist elite, it's a very, very powerful triangular relationship. You have the Western globalist elites, then you have Netanyahu, and you have Zelensky. They are all mutually reinforcing. There is, however, a difference. And the difference very clearly is that the populations are 100% opposed to marching east into Ukraine. And NATO is very, very fragile at this point, as is the EU. Those institutions are not going to survive this experience. I don't care what anybody says publicly. Behind the scenes, those are dead men walking. So frankly, if you're Putin right now, you thank everybody for their interest in peace. You compliment them and pay tribute to them and thank President Trump and all the efforts that he's making, and you send people out to talk, and you turn to the general staff and says, let me know when you're on the outskirts of Kiev.
Jeez. Well, Colonel, we'll get you out of here on this. Last week, you heard from the Trump administration that if Putin doesn't come to the peace talks table, we're at massive sanctions, like crushing sanctions. Of course, we heard that under Biden, and Russia's GDP has increased. Their factories are humming along. They've moved further away from the U.S. dollar. They've aligned themselves with BRICS nations even more closely with China, et cetera. So those sanctions absolutely had the opposite effect. And then we heard from J.D. Vance today on a gaggle on an Air Force plane saying, if Putin doesn't come to the table on this, or if we don't have peace talks, then we're ready to say goodbye. So what two things, how do you square those two things? Massive sanctions, number one, would those work against Putin and Russia? Number two, we're just going to walk away. Is that possible? The U.S. would just totally wash its hands and walk away?
Well, I think, first of all, you've answered your own question. No one in Russia is surprised by the sanctions threat. They're quite prepared for that. Remember, Putin just a few weeks ago spoke to the leaders of all the major industries and firms in the private sector in Russia and said it's time to come to terms with reality that these sanctions are never going to go away. The West is not going to finally wake up and turn back towards us and recognize that we're not the enemy. So we have to build bridges elsewhere. Those bridges are being built. It's called BRICS. And of course, you have the other supporting organizations like the Shanghai Cooperation Council and other entities, but they're all part of the same. Let's move away from the United States. Let's get out from under these people. Let's no longer be dependent upon them so that we can live in peace. In other words, in a very interesting way, the Chinese, the Russians, and the whole global South and everybody is practicing a form of containment towards us. We're seen as this rogue state, this unstable superpower that could lurch in the wrong direction at any given point in time. So what do? Well, you put as much distance between you and them as you can. And that includes reducing your economic dependency on them. So I think that's really what's going on. And I don't think anybody in Russia is terribly worried about the sanctions. And I know that President Trump continues to impute great importance to them, though I think privately he would like to get rid of them entirely. But you have something similar happening in the Middle East. And I think you need to understand that the Ukraine business is going to go away for the reasons we've already discussed. This war is going to end on Russia's terms. Vance is right. We'll just walk away because we can't do anything else. And eventually we will lift the sanctions. But in the meantime, we can't do that for fear of looking as though we've lost. Well, welcome to the real world. We lost a long time ago in Ukraine, and we've lost badly in Europe. It's not going to be a nice withdrawal from Europe. The years ahead, it's going to be ugly, and our position in that part of the world is going to be terrible. But when you go to the other pole in this triangular relationship, Mr. Netanyahu, that's a very different set of circumstances because Zelensky commands very little influence on the Hill. He is given tacit support, but Mr. Netanyahu commands far more influence in the Senate and the House than President Trump does. So the
obviously,
outcome
we saw that.
Different.
Sorry, I was going to say we saw that over the weekend with all the Israeli anniversary celebrations. It was cacophonous. Sorry.
No, you're dead right, Natalie, and people need to take that seriously. They need to understand that when it comes to anything of importance to Israel, Mr. Netanyahu is the de facto president, not Trump.
100%. Yeah. But long been saying that here on the show, and people get angry with me when we say the real president of the United States. But, that's the case.
Sometimes I maintain this illusion when I see the things that President Trump does because he built so many bridges last week in the Middle East. And it was incredibly encouraging that Israel was not leading him to do those things. And in fact, they weren't in Israel's interest. And then he comes home and the first thing he does is an anti-Semitism message on the White House X account. And I think maybe there's a play here that I just can't see, that he's, trying to be nice in order to back us out of this. And I don't know how that would work. This is just my blind faith at this point. So do you have any?
Yeah, and Natalie, you're on to something that's very important. He was in the Middle East last week for the purpose of doing several things. Number one, he wants to try and coax the Emirates as well as Saudi Arabia into not joining BRICS. Well, that's not going to happen. Mm-hmm. And the money and the investment that he's talking about, he wants to keep it in the United States what they've already got here, and he would like to add to it because of our very fragile position in the finance markets. You know, the 10-year bond yield continues to rise. And the worst thing that could happen to him and to, frankly, our economy would be for those Saudis and Emirates to suddenly pull their cash completely out of the United States. If they were to do that, we would be in a lot of trouble. For that matter, the Chinese, the Japanese, and the others, if they do the same thing, we've really had it financially. That's how bad the situation is for us right now. But then there's one other last part that doesn't get much attention. And that is that President Trump is also working very hard to hold together this Turkish-Israeli pact for hegemony over the region. Everyone was upset when he shook hands with Giuliani. Well, shaking hands with Giuliani was necessary for him to hold Erdogan inside this alliance with Israel. And when I say alliance, that's probably the wrong word. It's more like a non-aggression pact between the Nazis and the Soviets. And he wants to keep that together because that's the linchpin for hegemony for them and for, in his mind, for our continued influence. I think he's very wrong, and I think that that will ultimately fall apart. And I think we can already see the outlines of that collapse coming. And that's going to be very ugly because then Israel will absolutely stand completely alone in the region. But that's something else that we probably can't prevent. But I think that's a big part of what he was trying to do. So while people think, oh, this must upset the Israelis because he promised to send the F-15 now to Turkey. He's made these kinds of promises before, and a month or two later, well, I guess we can't do that. So I don't know that everyone is taking all of that as seriously over there as the public is here. Remember, we have this expression, flash to bang time in the military. You see the guns flash, and then you count a certain number of seconds, and then you hear the explosion. And that tells you roughly the distance. Well, for President Trump, flash to bang time needs to be short and quick to get the most exposure and media support out of it as he can extract. I think he did that this week, but I don't think it's going to last.
All right, Colonel. Well, we'll keep watching.
Watching jokes and live it up here or something. I mean, can't we?
I know. I was like, I didn't like any of that, but I need to hear it. I didn't come here to be told what I like.
Yeah, so. the truth, a realist. You know, because you get all these people, you get all these X accounts. They're like, this is the greatest thing in the world. And you know, you've been there. You've been inside the White House. You know exactly how this all works. And you know, people need to understand the truth behind all of this. Colonel, great to see you as always. We'll be watching this very, very closely as always. Thanks, Colonel.
Thanks, folks. Bye-bye.
Now, over the weekend, the Russian media has reported that Ukraine has hit an average of 1,300 deaths per day in this war. And so I can't see this as anything other than a mother. And to think, what if my son were out there right on the verge of peace talks? And I would be like, he needs to come home now. If it's time. Like, How can you see these people losing their family members while leaders just talk on the phone? It's incredibly frustrating to watch, and we don't even have family there. So our hearts are going out to actually the civilian and population that's being hurt. Well, and the massive graves that continue to expand day in and day out. There are the thousands. Right. Unwilling soldiers who don't want to be there. So this is the people angle. All right, we've got more news coming up here in a moment. We're going to talk about, President Biden suddenly has cancer, and everyone's kind of shocked at that. Oh, man, this came out of nowhere, or did it? And was there even more of a cover-up inside the White House, inside the Biden administration? We're going to talk about that. We're also going to talk about the Obama campaign. We're going to tell you that. Yeah. Sorry. Go. No, that's it. That was my aside. You keep going. Okay. But first, I'm going to tell you about our friends at Connect Invest, because is your money working for you? Well, investing in real estate has never been easier. Savings accounts and CDs offer low returns, barely keeping up with inflation. The stock market, volatile, totally unpredictable. One day you're up, one day you're down. If you're tired of watching your hard-earned money sit idle or ride the market roller coaster, it's time for a better solution. Now you can invest in real estate short notes with as little as $500. That's right, with annualized returns up to 9%. Yes, you heard me right, 9%. Real estate has long been a proven way to build wealth. It's my favorite way of building wealth. For most of the barriers, high cost, complex management, lack of time, how do you find a great property, all of that seems out of reach. And that's where Connect Invest comes in. So again, with as little as $500, you can start earning fixed monthly returns
by investing in short notes, which collectively fund commercial and residential real estate projects. No property management, no market swings, just steady, predictable income with annualized returns up to 9%. So here's how you check it out. Just go to redacted.inc/invest. And if you sign up, you get a $50 bonus just for signing up. So just go to redacted.inc/invest. When you sign up, you get a $50 bonus. And remember, you can start earning and start investing with as little as $500 into these different projects. Really fantastic. So again, redacted.inc/invest. All right. Thank you guys for subscribing and being a part of our show here. We really appreciate it. And thanks for, please subscribe. It's free to subscribe. And, whether, I don't know what they call it, follow or subscribe, whatever it is, it's free. So you can follow us on Rumble. You can follow us on YouTube, Twitch, and X as well. All right. Well, Europe better get ready for a massive amount of gun violence thanks to the war in Ukraine. According to a new report, and this story really pisses me off because we shipped hundreds of billions of dollars in weapons to Ukraine. Missiles, rifles, drones, explosives, handed over like candy on Halloween. And now guess what? Surprise, those same weapons are flooding into Europe's black markets as we speak.
And recall when Senator Paul asked for an accounting of these weapons, Congress shot him down and said, we're actually not that interested during the Biden administration. So any efforts to count and track, nope. Even though we've had reports of these weapons going missing since the beginning of the conflict. Reports from CBS News saying that these weapons are being shipped and people are pulling up in their hatchback. Civilians, just put it in there. All good.
Well, we've already explained how those same weapons are now in the hands of Mexican cartels and ISIS. But now this new report out today shows Europe is the next chaos zone set to receive these Ukrainian weapons. According to a brand new report from the Eurasia Observatory, Europe is about to be awash in American-made weapons. And not just a few crates here and there. We're talking full-blown military-grade hardware showing up in the hands of gangsters, terrorists, organized crime syndicates all over the European continent. Gee, who could have seen this coming? Oh, right, we did. When we reported on this 2 years ago about those weapons already flowing into Africa. 2 years ago, we repeatedly talked about this while every corporate news anchor was crying, on cue for more money going into Ukraine. They need help over there. Hey, maybe track the weapons you're dumping into the most corrupt country in Europe. How about that? That's not going to end well. Heck, even CBS News ran their report nearly 2.5 years ago saying that most of the weapons going into Ukraine were untraceable. And then, of course, CBS News removed that video, buried that story because it ran counter to the narrative that the liberal media was putting out at the time. And if you called it out, you were called a Russian propagandist. This is Russian talking points. Oh, really? Now the chickens have come home to roost. The EU is quietly panicking now because, according to the experts, when that war machine finally winds down, and as Colonel McGregor just talked about, it will, this is going to be problematic for Europe. These former Ukrainian soldiers will now know how to use all of these American weapons. They're trained in sabotage. They're trained in drone warfare. They're trained in cyber attacks, you name it. And the real worry is they'll be able to carry out these criminal gang warfare all across Europe. Half this stuff was handed off to volunteer brigades, which is at the heart of this report, volunteers, with no accountability whatsoever. The other half probably went straight out the back door into the hands of arms traffickers. Europol, which is Europe's own police agency, has already admitted that black market weapons from Ukraine have already turned up in Sweden, Finland, Spain, and others. That's not speculation. That's not rumor. That has been confirmed. And police have confirmed a rise in Ukrainian gang activity all across Europe. The criminal networks are very excited about this for these weapons to flow in. They're drooling about it, in fact. A new supply chain of high-end American weapons. Job well done, NATO. Way to use American tax dollars. So we can see a surge in violence and crime across Europe because it's coming.
Well, even the liberal media is feeling a bit hoodwinked by President Biden's cancer diagnosis and his recent announcement. Now, if you missed it over the weekend, he said that he suddenly has a stage 4 prostate cancer that has moved into his bones, and the prognosis, the diagnosis is grim. Now, MSNBC had a specialist on today who said that by no means could this cancer be sudden if it is in fact this advanced.
You're an oncologist, obviously incredibly respected. You believe that it is likely, just for those just tuning in, you believe it is likely if this prostate cancer has spread to the bone that he could have had it for up to a decade, but certainly it's likely. Would it be fair to say it's likely to have had this for at least several years?
Oh, more than several years. You don't get prostate cancer.
I just want to stop you. So this is not speculation. If you have prostate cancer that is spread to the bone, then he's most certainly, you are saying, had it when he was president of the United States.
Oh, yeah. He did not develop it in the last 100, 200 days. He had it while he was president. He probably had it at the start of his presidency in 2021. Yes, that I don't think there's any disagreement about that.
Okay. Now, here is something. So you would wonder, okay, what do we know about his medical history then? Well, it turns out we've known this since 2008, that he had a pre-existing prostate condition. And the way that they have reported his health, this is no surprise to anybody, has been incredibly inconsistent. Now, let's just back up a little so that we cannot pretend that we are surprised. In 2008, the Obama-Biden president campaign released 49 pages of Joe Biden's medical records, but only to the media. We never got to see it. So we just had to trust that these news outlets told us the truth. So let's go with what we know. Now, here, according to Politico, look at the date on this. 2008 is what we knew then, that he had near fatal aneurysms in 1988, that he had arterial fibrillation in 2006. He had his gallbladder removed in 2003. Again, some other surgeries in 2006. And again, he had sleep apnea and also a pulmonary function report. We were also at the time told that he was on prostate medication for an enlarged prostate. This was clarified in 2019 as a condition called benign prostatic hyperplasia. It was in 2019 that we were told that he also had several non-cancerous elements removed in 2008, but we were not told that during that first campaign, including something removed that they found during a routine colonoscopy, and then several non-melanoma skin cancers removed. So this is quite a laundry list of health concerns. When you write them all out, it seems crazy how Democrats insisted that this guy was all A-OK and fine enough to stand election. Even so, it's clear from what we know, and again, we can't see the original documents. We have to trust what the media reported, but at least since 2008, we know that his prostate was enlarged and has been treated. So did he go a couple years and say, just don't look at the prostate this time? I don't want to see it. I don't want to know what's in there. I think I'm all good. I don't need to see it. Is that a possibility? Did he skip his screenings? Because it would be highly irregular for a doctor to say, well, we know you have this prostate condition, but we don't think we need to keep screening it. It's probably A-OK. Or was he lying all along? And again, it's clear that this guy is often screened for several types of cancers, including rectal cancer, prostate cancer, and skin cancer. This has been happening for over 15 years. We know that for a fact. So how is this one missing? So again, either he skipped some screenings or they're lying. Now, here's one thing I can't seem to figure out, though, is if in fact he knew he had cancer, the kingmakers we talked about last week from the Jake Tapper book. We're talking about Obama, Schumer, Pelosi, who clearly said after Biden performed poorly in the debate against President Trump in 2024, they said, well, we got to pull him. We got to go with Plan B. And they chose Kamala Harris. If they knew that he had cancer, they would surely have used that as an excuse to pull him. But they didn't. And instead, they went with the poorer optics of he's just too old. We're going to put Kamala Harris in. They would have used this clearly, which tells me that if the Bidens knew about it, Obama and his kingmaker camp did not, or else they would have used it, which tells me one more other thing important is that the Bidens don't trust them any more than we do. And you know who I'm talking about, the Obamas, the Pelosis, the Schumers of the world. None of them trust each other. Clearly, Clinton, none of it. So it doesn't add up. And it is in the public interest for us to know what they knew. We almost got, I mean, think about it. If he had won re-election and then was about to die from this, which experts are saying best case 20 months, then we would have had a President Kamala Harris, which is terrifying to think about. So we need to know what we were told, who knew what when. There are still, we are our own answers. Now, I mean, I've seen some comments like, he's not in office, just let him suffer with this, let him have some peace. But no, I mean, no, right?
No, of course not.
But no.
No. And that's how everyone's calling them liars in the chat room, which is not surprising. Liars. All right.
Right.
We got more news.
We have the receipts. Yeah. Sorry.
We have a lot more news to get to here on the Monday, so let's keep this train rolling. We're going to talk about Romania picking a new puppet president that's backed by the EU. Of course, they banned the other candidates. That's how it works in Romania. It's country in chaos right now. We're going to talk about that. But first,
we want to tell you about our show sponsors at Crowd Health. Now, Crowd Health is an insurance alternative. And in fact, here at the Morris House, we are Crowd Health customers. Now, how it works is you pay a membership and then your medical bills will then be crowdfunded rather by the Crowd Health community. Now, we have had several types of issues that have been successfully crowdfunded rather. So I know how anxietizing it is to think, wait, I wouldn't have medical insurance, but you can rest assured that with Crowd Health, you're in good hands. So you join this monthly group, you get the support of other people, plus you get good prices for medical care because when you go to a doctor's office or when you go for medical care, you're not paying the inflated price of insurance. You're paying the actual price of things. So, for instance, just a wellness check every year is about between $100 and $200. A hospital visit, right? Those things are not, you see it on your bill. If you ever check that price of something might be $3,000, but your insurance will be billed $6,000 because they can. Well, that doesn't happen. So it's really a punk rock type of insurance industry disruptor. Give them some of your time. If you go to joincrowdhealth.com, you can chat with someone online or you can get a phone call and they will take all the time in the world to explain it to you properly so that you know exactly what you're doing. And again, it really is comforting to know that this works. Like I said, we've had 2 visits to the ER, completely crowdfunded, and we also are getting cheaper prices for our Medicare medications and doctor's visits. So visit them at joincrowdhealth.com. Use the code Redacted at checkout and you'll get a membership for $99 a month for your first 3 months. So again, go to joincrowdhealth.com, use the code Redacted. You'll get $99 per month for your first 3 months. Now think about what you're paying for your healthcare now, probably about $2,000 for your family. That looks pretty good, right? So give them a call, ask some questions, joincrowdhealth.com. All right. Well, Romania has a new president, President Dan. I think it's Nicusor Dan is how you say his first name. But this election is a total sham. They had an election just a few weeks ago. The globalists didn't like who the people picked, so they reran the election until they got the guy they want. And what a surprise. The media is calling this an election stunner that they got the pro-EU aligned candidate in. So joining us to discuss is Ralph Schulhammer. He's the host of Hammer Time on YouTube and a specialist in European politics. Ralph, They could not let the people have this one, right? How obvious is this?
Well, they got President Dan. I guess this would have been the title of Forrest Gump 2 if they would ever had made that movie. Yeah, no, you're right. It turns out if you let people vote long enough, at some point you get the results that you're hoping for. Although I have to really kind of top my head to the candidate of the right, Mr. Simeon, who I think from a moral perspective and also for the stability of Romania, in the end did the right thing in accepting the results. Because despite him losing, he performed quite impressively. And I think he as an individual is more impressive than the original candidate who was the reason for the annulment of the election, Mr. Georgescu. So on the long run, I think the tendency, what we see in Romania and the rest of particularly Western Europe, is going to continue. This is a setback for those who support the right in Romania, but I don't think it's necessarily the end of the story.
What, you don't think it's the end of the story? Well, then how does this story conclude? Do we have an uprising? Do the people take to the streets and demand, or will we see a revolution? I mean, because that's how some of these things end up. That's how some of these stories end up.
Well, let me give you a broader answer. I mean, you just talked about what happened with Joe Biden. I mean, apart from the fact that what happened to the former US president was a form of elder abuse, but the kind of erosion that we see in political systems all over the West is something I believe none of us have experienced in their lifetimes. You can't trust anybody anymore. This is the thing. I was really working through the data. I was looking at the numbers. I was looking at, voter turnout. I was looking at the polls before because I got lots of emails saying something must have been wrong. So there was some shady dealings in this election. I cannot tell you, right? Maybe it was on the up and up, maybe it was not. But the point is that there's a growing number of people whom I sympathize with, who simply say for very good reason that no matter what information comes out, it's not true. And of course, this attitude is absolutely justified because if the wrong candidate wins, they simply annul the results and, send you back to the polls. Or you have a candidate like it was in the United States, who apparently had both cancer and dementia, and they pretended like nothing ever happened and nothing was going on. So this is very, very difficult. The truth itself, you can't say what it is. So the erosion of trust in the institutions will have in some countries as a consequence, as you just said, Kai, people taking to the streets. I think in other countries it will resolve itself at the ballot box. I mean, as you did see as a kind of a little bit of an optimistic outlook in the United States, Donald Trump then did win in 2024. So it can be done. The problem is, however, whoever the candidate is, the change candidate, right, he needs to be stronger than what you can call the margin of cheat or the margin of steal. If it's like
right, so is this like the too big to rig? Is this like the too big to rig campaign?
Absolutely.
That's what in America, too big to rig. Make it so big that Democrats can't rig it.
And of course you have to include, when we talk about rigged elections, it's not just about somebody stuffing the ballot box. It's also what we heard a couple of days ago, that the CEO of Telegram was getting pushed by French authorities not to allow conservative commentators to set up channels on Telegram for Romania. You had the entire European Union against you. So I'm sure there was a lot of pressure being built up behind the scenes. Now, that's also a form of rigging an election. If you pretty much try to influence all of the media to only report in one direction, that is a form of rigging an election because you expose people to a very one-sided kind of information.
Right. Yeah. But Ralph, your commitment to optimism is admirable, and I'm starting to lose confidence in marching alongside you. So we talked about the AfD and how they grew in the last election. They were almost there, but they did not get a majority. Now in Portugal over the weekend, the Chega party grew, but did not take power. How long can we hold this optimism, Ralph? You're an Austrian and you're optimistic, and I'm losing hope. So take me through this? How do I get my mojo back?
Well, it's an optimism in the sense that my biggest fear has been until a couple of years ago that people will just become utterly lethargic, that they will entirely stop to care and basically turn their back on politics altogether. This is not what we are seeing. Young people are going to the polls. We have higher voter turnouts in almost all the elections, with a few exceptions. But overall, people are more interested and more engaged in politics than they were before. Now, personally, I would prefer if change comes in a peaceful way. So I want to be very clear about this. But if in some cases it comes in a quasi-revolutionary way, to be quite frank, I don't really care that much anymore. I mean, it's pretty obvious that change is being needed. That is a consensus among the people. It's not a consensus, obviously, among the elites. Some elites, I still hope, will adapt. The point is, Milton Friedman once said, you don't have to vote for the right people. You have to create conditions where the wrong people do the right thing. Now, this is going to happen in some places. In the places where it doesn't happen, yeah, I think Clay's absolutely right. People will take to the street. And I don't want to sound facetious here, but then so be it. It's only a race against time. As you mentioned, the AfD in Germany. Either at some point the German establishment will accept the will of the voters, because during the next elections the AfD will be the strongest party. I think that's at this point almost unavoidable until something entirely unforeseen happens. Or, of course, as it happened in Germany before, yes, people will take to the streets as they did in 1989. I mean, as I said, I don't wish for revolution, but it's not necessarily something I'm dreading either.
Right.
The optimist, the eternal optimist. And I agree with you, I think we're going to see big change. Yeah.
Just one quick point, because when the change of the guards happens, I would rather have optimistic people than in charge who say, okay, the future is now ours to conquer, and not necessarily people who then just took back and say we need to take revenge on those who tried to prevent us from getting to power. I mean, there's a lot of work to be done. And even though, again, I sympathize with many of these new political movements, even if they would win the elections, even if Germany would have an AfD chancellor, the challenges are so massive that they will also have to communicate to the voters that they will not be able to change the world within 6 months. I mean, this is what Donald Trump is experiencing right now. Really changing a system from the bottom up is very difficult, hard work. So that also needs to be some expectation management on both sides when it comes to the parties and when it comes to the electorate.
Now, when they call him a pro-EU candidate, can you tell us, I mean, the opposition wasn't like, we're going to leave the EU right away. I don't even see that as possible for Romania. Was it really that extreme and scary that they couldn't have him?
No, that is a complete straw man. And as I said, if you look at the way in which Simeon comported himself, particularly during the election, I found him actually quite impressive. There are some issues. There is, for example, a huge Hungarian minority in Romania, and the nationalist Romanian candidates usually always had a problem with that minority. And Simeon was actually softening this down quite a bit. They're also not anti-EU. They're anti the current shape of the EU. And that's, of course, a completely different thing. If you look at polls, again, nobody in Europe, with very few exceptions, wants to leave the European Union, but they want to reform the European Union. They want a European Union that is more dedicated to the needs and the concerns of the majority of the people, and not a small cadre of bureaucrats in Brussels. I mean, for example, Ursula von der Leyen is not embodying, I don't have to tell you this, Natalie, right, the ideal of the European Union. I mean, we just saw this, by the way, 2 days ago. You have now the Pride Progress flag waving side by side with the European Union flag. Now, whatever you think about the European Union flag, but I think the Pride Progress flag is significantly worse, because nobody voted for that. But the idea to have a form of cross-border cooperation and an integrated internal market, that's something that most Europeans are okay with. It's more the moral, if you want, and ideological pressure from the top that they're resisting. But nobody says we have to go back to like a 1930s scenario where nobody is in a form of cooperative framework.
Sure. Yeah.
Ralph Schulhammer is the host of the Hammer Time podcast. Many people in our chat room saying this guy is based. Yes, he is. Ralph
Based.
always.
That's a good thing, right? That's a good thing.
Yes,
that's
it
a
is.
good thing. It is a good thing. That's how in the U.S. we say that is a good thing.
It means you base your opinions on real facts.
Yes.
I mean,
exactly.
It's getting hard. As I said, it's getting harder and harder and harder. I mean, the Joe Biden thing is the best example. You do no longer know whom to trust. It's maddening. I have to be quite honest.
Right. Yeah.
Ralph, great to see you as always. Thank you so much for your thoughts.
Thanks,
I know
guys.
it's almost 11 o'clock at night over there in Austria. So thank you, Ralph. Great to see you.
Thank
and our
you.
next guest is based as well, by the way.
He is.
He is.
Ralph was alluding to the fact that I text him a lot about how much I hate Ursula von der Leyen. I do that.
Yes.
So I'm like, how does this lady get away with this stuff? How does she represent people and make their lives so much worse?
Yeah.
So that is my bias. I admit it. I own it. And I think I take a lot of pleasure in that hatred. So he's the recipient
when she's
of
literally texting Pfizer and pushing an experimental vaccine on its populace, and they're like, no, we don't need to see those text messages.
Yeah.
Nothing to see here. Look away. Look away. All
we
right.
did a segment on that last week. I encourage you to look it up, and then you'll hate her as much as I do.
Hey, our next guest is based. That's his middle name, Kyle Seraphin, former FBI whistleblower. He's going to be joining us here in a second to talk about the truth about Jeffrey Epstein. Did you hear Kash Patel, Dan Bongino out there in that interview with Maria Bartiromo saying, yeah, Jeffrey Epstein killed himself. We've seen the file. So just
open and shut case, they say.
Just look away. Just look away. Okay, really? Okay, any thinking person would not accept that at face value, and our next guest is a thinking person. We're going to talk with him about that, but first,
we want to tell you about our friends over at American Financing because, of course, debt just doesn't show up one day. It builds up little by little. Credit cards, car loans, school loans, medical bills, and suddenly you're juggling all these payments feeling stuck. But here's good news for you. You're not stuck. You can get a reset by leveraging your assets, and American Financing can teach you to do this. Now, again, this is something that wealthy people do all the time with no qualms at all, but we are not taught this. We're not given a real financial education in American education. That's why they'll help you do this. They're saving homeowners an average of $800 a month. No judgment, no pressure, just real solutions that put you back in control. You stop digging yourself in the red and start building wealth for your family. It only takes 10 minutes to get started. You'll get all the information that you need, and then it will be on you to sit down and learn it and decide if this is a good option for your family. And again, the way that wealthy people work is they take each financial product, they study it, and they evaluate if that works for their family. So you need to be setting aside time to learn things like this in order to build wealth, and American Financing can help you. So get that monkey of debt off your back. Go to americanfinancing.net/redacted or call them at 866-890-8434. Again, that's americanfinancing.net/redacted or call them at 866-890-8434 and do it today.
Well, I think it's safe to say that something very strange is happening. Last week, FBI Director Kash Patel told a congressional hearing that, yes, Jeffrey Epstein killed himself. Senator Kennedy asked that question, and we were like, wait, what? I'm sorry, what? Okay, really? And then over the weekend, Dan Bongino, Deputy Director of the FBI, and Kash Patel in an interview with Maria Bartiromo, because, they're only apparently allowed to do like Fox News interviews. Apparently, that's like the only interviews you're allowed to do these days. They doubled down on this idea in a dual interview that Epstein did kill himself. Watch.
You said Jeffrey Epstein committed suicide. People don't believe it.
Well, I mean, listen, they have a right to their opinion, but as someone who has worked as a public defender, as a prosecutor, who's been in that prison system, who's been in the Metropolitan Detention Center, who's been in segregated housing, you know a suicide when you see one, and that's what that was.
He killed himself. You want me to get, I've seen the whole file. He killed himself.
I know it's hard work.
Now, Dan Bongino himself, successful Rumble show, had asked many valid questions when he was a host of his show, not representing the government. Those valid questions still persist, right? It's not an open and shut case. He himself encouraged us to ask these questions.
Right. He didn't have a cellmate. His cell block's guards fell asleep suddenly. His prison security cameras suddenly broke on the night of his murder. All of those things. Even friend of the show, my old friend Michael Bodden, who's one of the great medical examiners, said that it was clear to him that Epstein was murdered. Okay, I trust Michael Bodden's take on this. But anyway, so Dan Bongino and Kash Patel basically saying, hey, just trust us. We've seen the file. All right, let's bring in former FBI whistleblower Kyle Seraphin, the host of a great show that you all need to check out, Kyle Seraphin Show. Great to see you, Kyle. Welcome to the show. Great to see you again.
Hello, Morris. How you doing?
We're doing well. We're trying to sift through the garbage as usual. That's kind of like what our normal day looks like. So what was your take on this? I know you're not a sycophant, and you call BS when you see it. You're not, I'm a former FBI guy, so what these two guys just said in front of Maria Bartiromo, I'm taking it. They've seen the file. You know what? I'm done with this. What did you think when you saw this?
I heard we're not allowed to question the narrative now. We have to go with the Trust Me and Bro consulting firm that is out there pushing this information out. It's really troubling to me. There's two phrases with the word trust in it that I always have in my head. One of them is trust me, bro, which is sort of a joke that I'm not going to trust you. And then the second one is trust no one, because I grew up on the X-Files back when people thought that the FBI was going to be something cool. I actually have an X-Files poster on my wall because of that. So 16% of the American people actually believe that Jeffrey Epstein killed himself. 16%. That is a very, very small minority of people. So if you're going to come at us with, I've seen the file, and by the way, I've seen other crime scenes, you're going to probably have to do a little bit better for most people, especially when you've been a vocal opponent of this sort of deep state cover-up and the fact that the FBI has not been transparent about a bunch of things. I heard very little in the way of facts. I heard a lot of filibuster in that interview. And there's three versions of Dan Bongino that I've experienced in my life. There's Dan Bongino on the podcast, which is pretty unfiltered, and it's just whatever Dan thinks of. Then there's Dan Bongino, who's FCC compliant, and he's on the radio, and he says mostly what he thinks of, but he cleans up his language. And then there's there's Fox News Dan Bongino. We saw Fox News Dan Bongino the other night. Fox News Dan Bongino reads off a teleprompter, and it feels like his genitals are being squeezed a little bit in a vice because it's not a very comfortable position for him to just go off a script. That's what that looked like for me. I've done a number of interviews. I used to work in the medical field. I've had people lie to me for a very long time. I've got kids. That didn't feel genuine. The sad thing is that you can say things that are technically true, and this is really the way the FBI loves to spin stuff. Technically true, but obviously disingenuous. Okay. And so Jim Comey would say things like that, and Chris Wray used to say things like that. And I get the impression that there are two ways that you could say that someone killed themselves. One of them would be that they, as we like to say, sua sponte, on their own volition, decided, I'm done with this world and I'm choosing the off-ramp. And so they made a conscious decision with no other outside influence to do so. And then there's another way you could say that somebody, quote unquote, killed themselves, and they actually decided that I've got a choice between ending it myself and somebody else dying a horrible death that I care about. We always act like Jeffrey Epstein didn't know other human beings. He had family members. His brother was actually responsible for his body after he was found dead. So was there a toxicology report? Was there a record of who came and spoke to him? Did he get a message? What did the prison comms look like? Obviously we don't have a lot of this information publicly available. Is that what convinced them that he technically did kill himself, but didn't actually really come up with the idea because the alternative was something really horrible? I don't know. I feel like there's a lot more to it than just I've seen the file, and so you have to now believe me, especially when Dan went to that low voice of, I really hate saying it this way, and no one's going to believe. Like in the special operations world, they send everybody through SEER training. One of the things you can do during an interview is you can do different tactics to discredit your answer. So you can blink a lot, or you can blink not at all. You can shake your head no while you're saying things. You can look away and look like you're trying to find the answer somewhere else that looks obviously like you're under duress. And all of that interview looked uncomfortable and awkward, and no one is more sad than me to see it, because I really thought these guys were going to go in and do what we hoped, which was give us transparency and clean something up.
Well, the part that gets me is he says, I've seen the files. Now, when they were asked, why don't we know more about the assassination attempts on President Trump? And they said, well, there's active litigation, which is fair. The government cannot impugn a defendant while they're trying to defend themselves in a court of law. Mm-hmm. But is there active litigation around Epstein so I've seen the files, but you can't? What? Right. Okay. Why can't we see the files? Is there any legitimate reason that only they get to see it?
I mean, I heard that the files were on Pam Bondi's desk and we were going to see them. I don't remember how many weeks ago that was, but it wasn't very recently. So, we're also going to hear the truth about January 6th if you just wait another week. This feels very much like we're going to keep stringing you along with, to be continued stuff like when I was a kid and you had to wait every week to find out what the new episode was going to be. And I don't like it, because we're in an era of instant gratification. And we've also had people tell us that they were going to give us the truth. I know. That's what he said. Let
me just put this little aside, because they said we can't do anything about January 6th because we're past the statute of limitations. So we kind of wash we wash our hands of this. We wish we were in there, but we didn't. So that's that. So is that the case closed?
I mean, that is legitimate, though. I mean, they've got a federal statute of limitations, 5 years. Are they going to waste FBI resources doing something that they can't prosecute?
No, what they could do is they could get rid of the people that were involved in it that are still there. And one of them, Steve Jensen, was someone they defended at the end of that interview, which made me sick to my stomach, because what they said was factually inaccurate. They said that in order to find out what happened on January 6th, they needed three things. Dan Bongino, direct quote: we need people, we need information, we need people with information. First of all, that's two things. Let's be really real serious about that. And more importantly, you don't need to promote people into places in order to get information from them when they work for the federal government. You can compel an interview. Steve Jensen is 1 year away from being able to be eligible for a retirement pension. So I think he has a lot of a vested interest, because he's not fully vested in that pension, to cooperate. If they said, come and speak the truth, you're going to get either what's called a Garrity or a Kalkine's warning. Those are the two tactics. They're kind of like a variation on Miranda when you work inside the federal government. One means that you're not going to be criminally liable, but we could take your job. And the other one's you're going to be fine, but we want all the information and we're going to keep you safe from it. End of the day, they can compel him to speak. And the FBI has various methods in order to do that administratively. They bring you in on various different security investigations. And so he could lose his pension over it, or they could promote him to a spot so he's in charge of the pipe bomber investigation and claim that that was the reason. I have it on pretty good authority from people inside the Bureau. They promoted him, didn't realize what they were stepping into, and then they've been doing CYA ever since. They've actually changed the policy about the FBI releasing press releases about who they promoted to these senior positions, because all the people that are in management have dirt on them at this point. They all have something dirty, and there probably are some decent human beings mixed in the bag there as well. At the end of the day, you should throw them all out, because none of them said no to the COVID vaccines when they went out there. They didn't protect their people. They allowed people like me to get thrown out over it. None of them were aggressive whistleblowers that went forward when some of us went to Congress. And if they haven't done that, they should be gone. I think that's what we voted for. I thought that's what we were hearing these guys were going to go do, and then they haven't done it. So for me, this is like a massive letdown. It's so disappointing.
But trust me, bro. Trust me, bro, because...
Trust me, and bro consulting.
I mean, remember
bro, but hold on,
memes?
in a week...
We put you in cool sunglasses. We have faith in you.
Yeah, we had all the music of you walking in there like a gangster, Cash Patel.
Club.
But I want to get to something that they did say during this interview was, just wait. In a week, just give us about a week, because we've got some bombshell stuff that we're about to drop that we discovered. So just wait. And Maria kind of pressed him on it and said, yep, it's coming. It's coming. Do you buy that anymore?
No, because I watched the interview that Cash Patel did with Trey Gowdy. He was 30 days into his term, and he walked in and said, I wanted to get, some time to get things together. And let me just tell you, we're going to work on chain of command and leadership structure. And we're going to fix the problem in DC, because there's 11,000 FBI employees here. So we're going to send 1,500 of them out into the field to mess up what they're doing. I mean, at the end of the day, he talked about it being a third of the FBI's workforce or close to it. It's now going to be a quarter of the FBI's workforce still is in the DC area, whether it be Baltimore or Washington Field or headquarters proper. Like, the things they are saying don't make sense when you've worked there. And the answer has always been the thing that Dan Bongino, look, I just go back to what Dan Bongino said about the FBI. First of all, he said that in 2018, it was like kind of the good men and women, and there's a couple of people at the top that are ruining it for everybody. And then we saw through 2020 and 2021, by 2022, he was out there saying it needs to be dismantled, that it's not redeemable. It's an irredeemable organization. And by the way, I've been saying that if there was ever a chance to do it, you had to get rid of the rot. And that means the people that are at the GS-15, that's your secondary supervisor level, and then everybody in senior management, all the SESers, because all of them said yes when they should have said no. Or they should have said, hold on a minute, is this even constitutional? Why are we in such a rush to push into these policies from the previous administration? Why are we running after trespassers with everything we've got? Are there not more pressing needs? Because there really are. We find it every day. The FBI doesn't catch legitimate terrorists. They actually set up terrorists. I was in a movie with Dan Bongino that was about that. It was called The Police State, and it was done with Dinesh D'Souza. The entire premise is that the FBI sets people up, and they've been doing it for 20 plus years. And by the way, everybody who thinks it's like, oh, they were just going after right wingers, I want people to open their minds. I'm an independent conservative person. And when you look at what the evidence shows, the FBI just goes wherever its next paycheck is, wherever the next pot of congressional money is. And so in the early 2000s, they were going after Muslims and mosques because that was hot, because after 9/11, that's what we did. And then they sort of ran out of that. Then they went after this thing called HVEs. And I know we've talked about it before, but they found people that were in the United States that found foreign ideology. So they went after those people. And they ran out of that, but they were already looking in the country. So they found like white supremacists and militia violent extremists, maybe guys who might have like a hatchet on the wall, or a bayonet from World War II, or they might have like a "Don't tread on me" flag, God forbid, or a Betsy Ross flag like I have over my shoulder. Like, all of these things then became the symbol of militia violent extremists and anti-government, anti-authority violent extremists. Read that, MAGA people. It's not about an ideology that they were like owned by the left. They're owned by whoever pays them. The FBI goes after the dollar amount that Congress puts out there. And if you're going to say that there actually is a uniparty and that there is just one thing that operates in Washington, D.C. and pushes policy out, then you have to believe that it's going after both sides when it needs to, because it doesn't really care about you and it doesn't care about me. It certainly doesn't care about American liberties. The FBI has proved it over and over again. And I thought the guys that went in there knew that, because they said it for 10 years. They made millions. Both of them did. I mean, Cash is a multimillionaire. Dan Bongino is a multimillionaire. We have two multimillionaires that are in there that shouldn't be buyable. And we thought they were going in there with the same principles that we all were hearing. And instead of like what we see with Pete Hegseth, where he's like closest to what the warfighter needs, the right answer in the FBI was always to take brick agents, whether we call GS-13s, take the first line supervisors, the supervisory special agents, the GS-14s, and make them in charge of the FBI because they're closest to the mission. And instead, you're getting a bunch of supervisors and headquarter people that have been doing programmatic management and Kinsey consulting sort of schemes to be able to keep bonuses. And they're the ones who are advising these guys. Like, I guarantee you this, I still know more trustworthy people in the FBI than Dan and Cash combined at this point. And I haven't been there in a couple years. That's not a good situation. Wow. They don't have a local roadmap. They don't have a tour guide to show them who's untrustworthy. And they should assume everybody's untrustworthy. And I think they've chosen the opposite.
What is the biggest threat in the United States right now? And is it in alignment with what Cash has said publicly in his mission at the FBI? What do you think the biggest threat to Americans is right now?
I think it depends on what you actually think the FBI is and should do. If you want to go after a proactive threat, there's a massive argument to be made that international terrorism is still the biggest threat, because you need a very complex, sophisticated sort of intel gathering capability to go after it. And by the way, we imported 100,000 Afghans plus however, God knows how many millions of people came in over the southern border that we don't have any idea who they are. So that's a real problem. They brought in people and material, and they brought in plans. I've talked to people like Sarah Adams. I've talked to other intel analysts that think that that's a real probability, that there are independent cells around the United States that are just waiting for the best opportunity for them to be able to have a multimodal, multi-location strike in the United States that would make everything else we've seen, sort of pale in comparison. If they can get their ducks in a row, that would be devastating. But I'm not really big and keen on the FBI doing pre-crime, because that's what that involves. So, you could make the argument that violent crime is really a big deal. The problem is that the FBI doesn't have a primary investigative role in violent crime. The FBI's only job there is law enforcement assist for local PDs. And there's a good argument to be made for that if that's what you want to do. But that means dismantling a huge chunk of what the FBI is and does, primarily the intel bracket. And I'd be fine with that if that's what we said. If we said we want the FBI to go after violent crime and interstate crime. Kash Patel said he was going to sort of like deprioritize white collar crime. Who else goes after federal level frauds with millions of dollars at stake? There's really nobody that's going to go do that. We already have an organization that goes after drugs, the DEA. We already have another organization that does the same thing in the ATF, even though they infringe on our civil liberties because they go after guns too, but they mostly go after drugs and guns combined. So why is the FBI going to go after it? They said child sex trafficking was a big deal. Have they promoted that to the number one banded threat in the United States? The FBI actually prioritizes threats based on what are called band levels at a national level and at a local level. And if they haven't made child sex trafficking and human trafficking in general like one of the top 3 threats in the country, then that's all lip service. And I haven't heard them use the words, so I don't know that they have. And people who know what to listen for have been listening for it. And the people who are asking those questions aren't getting those answers either. So if they did, great. I think it's a moral evil. So you can do that. But, however you decide, there's always going to be a political aspect to how the FBI does business, because just like every prosecution at the state or the local level, whatever you focus on is what you consider to be the biggest priority. And that says a lot about what you value, right? So if that's what Trump thinks is the most important thing, he could do that. You can make arguments in many different facets. I'm not mad about them saying that they want to go after and help violent crime stop, because that would actually make a difference. I just don't think 14,000 agents, of which maybe 10,000 are investigators. I'm not sure 10,000 investigators across the country are going to change the needle for most Americans in most cities. I just don't, because, there's a million cops out there in uniform across this country. That's where the money ought to go.
Yeah. All right. Well, I guess it's inexplicable. You know, the headlines this morning that really teed me off is the spiral of silence, is that the media refused to report on these inconsistencies in Epstein's death. And now the media is reporting that the head of the FBI is saying, see, there was never anything to see here, open and shut case. And so these MAGA conspiracies are unfounded, and that's the end of it. And never get answers to why was his roommate moved the day before? Why were the guards not checking on him and falsified the logs? Why did the cameras go out? These are blaring questions, and the media's victory lapping, and that makes me mad. So.
Let me add 2 points to that. Number one, They said that they've seen the file. Why are we supposed to believe that what's in the file is honest, was done accurate, without some sort of nefarious intent? You could exhume the body. The body is actually interned in Palm Beach, Florida. So that's actually a thing that could be done. Do we have the toxicology? Is there another way to run those things? Those seem relevant. Did somebody get sedated before a strangulation or something? Because that could be really interesting. So exhuming of the body is one possibility. But why do we have to trust the file? That would be the first sort of thing you'd question. If you wanted to start from square one, you'd do that. And the second thing is, and this is maybe more of a meta-analysis, but I have this belief that only the enemy can tell you where you are weak and where they are strong. And so I keep telling this to people. If you want to see who's really problematic to folks that are on the hard left and expect us to go the other direction than what I think is right for this country, see who they're complaining about. Because they're not complaining about Dan Bongino and Kash Patel right now. They're not. I watch it every single day. I read almost exclusively left-leaning sources because it goes against what my confirmation bias is. And I don't see them crying about what these guys are up to. In fact, I had people inside the Hoover building tell me that when Kash Patel was sworn in, people packed their stuff into bankers' boxes and they planned on moving out. And the first day when they actually took the stuff from their cars and left them in their desks was on February 23rd, when he went against Elon Musk's request by Doge to give everybody 5 things that they accomplished in the week. And he told the FBI, don't worry about that. Like, you're exempted from this mandate government wide. That was the first time when he stepped out of step with what we thought the agenda was. And then the second time when everybody unpacked their boxes and said, I got it, I'm safe, was when they promoted Steve Genshin. And that happened the last month of March. So if people don't know that the folks that we think are problematic inside the FBI, they now think that they're safe. And, like I said, the enemy always tells you the thing you need to know about yourself. And the media has been doing it as well. So those are the 2 things I want to leave you with.
So I'll get you out of here on this, Kyle. That's fascinating. I never really thought about that.
Yeah.
Who are they attacking the most then? Is it Tom Homan? Is it ICE agents? I mean, is that the focus from the left?
And Hegseth as well, I think as well. So I think if you go, and there's obviously a lot of money behind DOD, there seems to be a concerted effort to continue to push on that. They are seriously pushing on things like immigration. They think they can win on that, on the sort of heartstrings issues. So you see where they are most upset. And I see constant outrage about these things. What I don't see is people talking about the fact that when the FBI was asked for all the names of agents who worked on January 6th, and there was something like 5,000 names, if you guys recall back, this was in February, I want to say.
Yeah.
In February, DOJ queried the FBI. The FBI resisted. We had the acting director at the time, Brian Bristol, say, we're not going to give it to you. And then there's ongoing litigation right now, and it's being done representing the FBI's employees in the name of the FBI Agents Association. So it's kind of like a professional union, if you will. They're not really a union because they don't have like collective bargaining, but they do sort of take dues every month, and you can deduct it from your paycheck, and they directly are able to sort of finance, shared legal defense. The FBI Agents Association hired Norm Eisen and Mark Zaid to represent them. If that tells people anything, Norm Eisen was involved in the first Trump impeachment. Who are like, and Mark Zaid is hard left. So you took people that are on the opposite, like that are like the part of the resistance, anti-Trump TDS to the max, and you had them represent the FBI agents against the interest of the DOJ per Donald Trump's orders. This should tell you everything you need to know about that, like the average quote unquote rank and file that's in there. This is not like a shallow problem that management can fix. And if people don't realize that, you don't realize how deep this problem is. The FBI Agents Association is a hard left Marxist style organization. They promote DEI and equality and all the worst buzzwords you can think of. And they've been doing it for years. I actually opted out of it when they went after Americans' privacy. They went after and they said, we think that the FBI director, going back to Comey, that the Going Dark initiative needs a lot more attention, and we need to have lawful access to things like Signal and your end-to-end encrypted apps. And I stopped giving them money because I said, I'm an American first, and one day I won't be an FBI agent. And I don't want you guys to be able to hack my phones because you have a backdoor to all the end-to-end encrypted apps. We don't destroy technology just because some people abuse it. Work harder. And I got an hour of pushback from the president of that FBI Agents Association. There's a new one now. She's a woman. She gets interviews on CNN and MSNBC. That should tell you a lot as well. I never see her on Fox. There's a real problem within this agency, and it is not recaptured. And right now, it doesn't look like it's going to be.
Okay. Kyle Seraphin from the Kyle Seraphin show. Thank you so much for that context. It really does shine some light on us with why do we not get these answers? And you have questions to further that. Yeah, there's.
No, I'm paying attention to every word. I mean, it's absolutely fascinating, Kyle, as always. We really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks for having me back on, y'all.
Unbelievable. All right. Well, let us know your thoughts on that in the comments below. I mean, do you agree with Kyle, or do you think that we're going to suddenly magically see some answers here from the FBI?
I want to see that file. If they can see the file, then I can see the file.
And exhuming the body.
I have no clearance, but that's what I want.
No, I'll give you clearance.
Thank you.
I will grant you clearance to see that. And I think the exhumation of the body would make the most sense too, with toxicology and all of that. The family could do that. His brother could do that.
It's not like it's classified. It couldn't be classified. It's not like a state secret, and so it wouldn't be classified. So it would be maybe just Bill like Barr. any other file.
Yeah.
It should be.
Maybe Bill Barr got it sealed. All right. I want to tell you about this. If you pay attention to this, guys, okay, this is amazing. All right. If you or someone you love is on Medicare or getting close, listen up. The Department of Justice recently filed a massive fraud complaint against 3 of the largest Medicare brokers in the country. According to the DOJ, these brokers misled seniors, claiming to offer unbiased help while secretly steering them to different insurance plans that paid huge kickbacks. It's crazy. It's disgusting, but let's be honest, it's not surprising. Medicare enrollment is confusing by design. Big insurance is taking advantage of yet another poorly run government system. That's why we recommend Chapter. After their own families were misled by brokers, Chapter was founded to fix this broken system. Chapter is fully independent. They're the only national advisors that search every Medicare plan available to find the one that actually fits your needs. They advocate for you, not the insurance company. There's no steering, there's no pressure, just ethical, honest help at no cost to you. Zero cost to you, guys. Did you hear me? It's zero cost to you. It's free. So if you want help with Medicare, give Chapter a call. The number on your screen is right there, 202-655-5811, to speak with a trusted Medicare partner. And again, they'll help you figure out which plan is right for you, and it's free. Chapter has saved the average senior over $1,000 a year, and they are free. Again, free for our audience. Okay? Call them today. Go to askchapter.org/redacted. I'm telling you, these guys are great. I've spoken with their team, and I love what they're doing is free for you guys, and it's really fantastic. Try them out. askchapter.org/redacted. All right. And thanks to all of you guys for subscribing and being a part of our show here. We really appreciate it. TJ in our chat on Rumble says, I don't even believe Epstein is dead. All right, that's another level. That's another level of the Epstein thought, right? Is he even dead at all? I believe he's dead, but I really think I think there's still so many questions. And look, you remember the interview with his brother that Tucker did, right? I mean, he clearly believes he was murdered, and there's a lot of mysterious questions as to how that cell block, how those cameras mysteriously turned off, guards were mysteriously asleep. One of the highest security prisons with the most high-profile client that you have, dead. Unbelievable. Thank you guys for subscribing to the show. We really appreciate it. We're going to be watching very closely all of these stories. We're going to be keeping an eye, of course, on what happens with President Trump and Vladimir Putin on these peace talks. Will we see some movement there? Just a few minutes ago, we got word from the European Central Bank. Of course, right on cue, the European Central Bank is now warning that gold markets could pose a threat to the Eurozone and its financial stability in the event of geopolitical stress due to demand for physical settlement. They want to outlaw gold in the EU? right as President Trump is lining up to have peace with Ukraine. They're gonna try to keep you from using gold in the European Union. It's amazing how the timing it's amazing, isn't it? Right on cue. Right on cue. All right, guys, that's going to do it for us on this Monday. We'll be back here tomorrow at 4 p.m. Eastern time. Thank you guys for having us in your homes every day. We really appreciate it. And we'll see you tomorrow, everyone. Have a great night.